Also, NanoDoc can be used for optical data storage. Here's some examples of these guys. Did some work a couple of years ago. It's been Australia, koalas and kangaroos. We use NanoDoc. Another thing of interest is producing photocatalytic materials. And this is my honours student last year, his honours with me. When we did this, titanium dioxide shows a lot of promise, however the band gap isn't quite right. So we looked at trying to change the band gap and get better photosensitivity. And we did that by simply diffusing carbon into the titanium dioxide. People looked at using noble methods. But we thought we'd use carbon. The reason is, two reasons. One, by anodizing the titanium to form titanium dioxide, it's a very cheap process. The second thing is, carburizing is also a very cheap process. You can do it to large panels. Whereas if you look at the noble metal stuff and that, you're making things about this big. So not very good for industrial application. These are the coatings, doesn't mean that much. All we did was we measured some current when we shone a light on it, and tomorrow we're going to do some hydrogen evolution measurements here on these samples. But you can see that depending on what treatment we did, how much carburizing we did, whether we carburized it first or anodized first, we've got different jumps in current. You can see this one quite good. And in indirect sunlight, maybe 90 microamps jump when the light shone on it. So we're very hopeful about this one. Just nanometer coatings. Our problem is that what we really like is something like this, because these solar cells based on titanium dioxide and photocatalytic depend on a very large surface area. It doesn't work because dye-sensitized solar cells will not work on normal sized titanium dioxide. It has to be nano-sized because of the large surface area. So there's more surface area for reactions to occur. So people are now working on this, including Don and myself. We did some experiments earlier in the week. It's not here, it's gone. One of the students trying to produce that. Oh, he did. He can explain to you what he did. But we did some anodizing to try and get these nanoscale nanotubes of titanium dioxide, hopefully with a bigger surface area, to try and do this photocatalytic thing. The other thing is nanocomposites. And nanocomposites are important because we can do a whole range of things, like we can with normal composites. We can make things stronger, we can make them more conductive, we can make them tougher. It depends what we want to do. So if we look at polymers, for example, if I want to improve the properties of polymers, I've got two choices. I can improve the properties through the materials chemistry of the polymer, or I can make a composite. So if I was interested in electrical properties, I'd have to go to these conducting polymers, which are not very stable, or I can make a composite. So this is my polymer. I want to go to there by making a composite. Generally, we can use carbon fibres and all sorts of things. But if that's not good enough, we find new reinforcements, and this is where we go to carbon nanotubes and graphene and nanoparticles, because they've got these really nice properties that we want to use. So if we use carbon nanotubes, we can put them in the material. And I say we can put these things in, but it's not easy. Trying to disperse nanoparticles in anything is not an easy task. If you're trying to put them in polymers, you've got to do a lot of surface chemistry in order to get them to disperse evenly. So it becomes a problem. So we can use carbon nanotubes, and there's a lot of work people doing carbon nanotubes. I noticed this year particularly, a lot of work being done on putting graphene in things. Generally to increase strength. So if carbon nanotubes are so good, we could use other nano stuff. And the advantage is, with these, if we use, this is a standard, if we use standard composite, we have our matrix and our reinforcement. And we have an interface. So the green part there is the interface. At the nanoscale, when we put nanoparticles in, but even for very small volume fractions of particles, the nanoparticles are so close together. In fact, the matrix sort of disappears. We have an interface all over. So besides putting the particles in, we actually change the properties of the matrix considerably as well. So people think that this sort of thing is going to happen. Often, it's always the case if I make things stronger and harder, I make them more brittle. People are saying, well, this is going to happen. I'm not going to make the thing more brittle by adding this reinforcement. I'm still going to bump up the strength and stiffness. And some work we've done back in Sydney tends to suggest that this may be the case. Sometimes you don't get an increase in strength, you definitely don't get a decrease in toughness. Done some work with using nanometals. Why do I want to do that? If I put nanometal in a polymer, then I might make the polymer magnetic or conducting. I might get some interesting plasma absorption in the polymer. So I can get all these sorts of things going on. So, and this all comes back to, and as you saw with the gold nanoparticles, if I change the size, I change the colour, I also change the properties, which tends to suggest I might be able to dial up properties by using different particle sizes. So this is gold polymers. You can see here a whole range of shapes and sizes. It's very interesting for people working on composites because people that work on composites know that particle shape does affect the mechanical properties of the material. So we've done some work. We can use clays. Clays are a layered structure. If we're very clever, we can exfoliate the clay layers. So we have a single clay layer, just like a graphene sheet. And we can use those. And we get this, which is this, as opposed to that. And this gives some very interesting properties. And we did some work. We exfoliated it because there really should be an X-ray diffraction peak there that was missing. So we know that we didn't have this layered structure. And you can see here, we added two different sorts of, we had nano alumina and nano clay, and we've got some interesting properties. By joining the two together, we've got much better properties. We don't need to go through more. You can see there that strength went up and also the impact strength. So we did get a reduction in impact strength. Another example is this, had some work done where we added cobalt nanoparticles to polyethylene oxide. And you can see that we added about 1 volume percent. And the percolation threshold for the conductivity jumped several orders of magnitude. So 1 volume percent. It's another advantage of putting nanoparticles in polymers, because I can get away with adding 3 or 4 volume percent, which doesn't affect the manufacturing of the polymer. If I use more particles and put 20 or 30 volume percent in, I get all sorts of problems if I want an injection mold or do any sort of forming process. So you can see here the top left-hand one is the one that gave us that several orders of magnitude change in conductivity. And it's because we were clever, we controlled the cobalt nanoparticles. Why cobalt? We were actually interested in magnetic properties. We wanted to make a part for an electric motor. We did these electrical conductivity machines. thing, as I said, this one we did some work with some Chinese colleagues putting carbon nanotubes into aluminium, which is a difficult task as well. And we're interested in getting uniform distribution, and we managed to do that. You can see there in the top right-hand corner, they're the carbon nanotubes coating the aluminium powder before we hot press. And you can get all these different sorts of nanocomposites. Finish off here, I think, looking at these nanocrystalline materials. If I take a metal and reduce the crystal size, generally the strength goes up. And the reason is that the strength is sort of dependent on those dislocations moving. As I said, I think I said earlier, if I distort the lattice, I hinder the dislocation movement. Well, the dislocations can only move to the grain boundary. If the grain boundaries are close together, dislocations can't move very far, and the strength goes up. So everyone thought, wow, let's make nanocrystalline crystals, or grains, and the strength will be huge. That's what I just said. And you see this bit. So that's what we're looking at. And we can actually see these dislocations. I'll just put this in so you can see some dislocations. Good upside here. This is a transmission electron microscope image from the 1950s. And those lines there are the dislocations. Those are atoms moving. So if I can hinder those, I increase the strength. The problem is that I get to a certain size and the strength drops off. And the reason here is that I get the grain smaller and smaller, the dislocations can't move much, so the structure says, I've got to move, somebody's applying the stress, the grains start to move past one another. So you can see here, somebody scratched, this is one grain, this is another, and this is what's called grain boundary sliding, Nonetheless, that can become very important because we can get what's called superplastic effects, where we can make these metals that stretch like a polymer. So that's important. The risk assessment, as I said, we should have a look at this if we're going to work with nanomaterials, because it can be a problem. One, it can be a problem for you handling these nanomaterials, but in this day and age, whenever you develop a new material, you have to do a life cycle assessment of it. So you have to tell somebody what's going to happen to it when you're finished using it. And if it's nasty, like asbestos, then it's going to be a big problem. So no one will want to use it. As I said, all these things change. Surface to volume ratios are different with quantum size effects, and the size and shape may yield new biological interactions. I already put that one up. An example, people have injected colloidal gold into their joints since the 30s for rheumatoid arthritis. It's supposed to help rheumatoid arthritis. However, it's shown that the mobility of spermatozoa decreases in the presence of gold. With these gold nanoparticles. We also have a modern, particularly in Australia, they have this paranoia about germs. Everything's got to be super clean, which is making things worse because children grow up with no natural immune system. But the free market response was put silver nanoparticles in everything. And you can go to the supermarket here, I've seen it, you can buy deodorant with silver nanoparticles in it. You can buy socks with silver nanoparticles in the socks to kill bacteria. It's everywhere. The problem is, and silver's chosen because it's very good antibacterial agent. People have known about it since the Romans. They used silver as an antibacterial. And this is where